So as I've been covering Dune Awakening, I've noticed a lot of people have the concern that the game is going to be too samey. As it is in the Dune universe and it's on Arrakis, it's primarily going to be a big desert almost all of the time. And there is some ways you can try to change it up a bit, but primarily it's gonna be a big desert. So I want to go over all of the information around this, around different environments we could see, and on the more exciting side, I want to go over some of the new content we could see after the game is actually released, because we've gotten some pretty massive teases on things we could see in the future. And the developers were actually asked this in one of their interviews, where they were basically asked about environmental fatigue, which is the concern a lot of players have, that it's going to be all desert, there's not going to be a lot to break this up, and it's going to be way too samey. And the start of their response was, there's 2 points here. First of all, I think there's a misconception about the desert visuals of Dune caused by the movie. Both of the new movies are almost completely set in deserts on Arrakis. You don't really see much variation in environments. This is not how Herbert described everything. In fact, I think Herbert was thinking more about southern Arizona style deserts with a few more plants. And they go on to say, we have areas in the game that are much greener. And then there's the polar caps, which are actual polar caps on Arrakis, and they're clearly there. We have planned these biomes for the game's post-launch, particularly the ice caps. So there's a pretty interesting information here. Some of this information harkening back to the actual Dune books, which it does seem like some of the developers are pretty big fans of the books. So even though this game is going to be a bit more tied to the new Dune movies, it also seems like they definitely have people on the team that are big fans of the books. And some of the information in the books that might have not been directly shown in the new movies may be shown within the game. And this just mentioning that there are going to be some more greener areas in Dune Awakening on launch. So there is going to be some environmental things to break up the monotony of only sand, only desert. And to tie into that, there's also going to be Ecology Labs. Now, these are kind of going to be the dungeons of Dune Awakening, and you also get to see these in the movie. These are basically these labs that were set up on Arrakis, experimenting on different things. One of the big things mentioned in the movies is that these Ecology Labs were trying to terraform Arrakis to make it a green and lush planet instead of just pure desert. And as these are Ecology Labs where they're growing a bunch of plants and doing a bunch of tests on other life forms, you're definitely going to see a lot of different environments in what are the dungeons of Dune Awakening. So that is definitely something that's going to help break up the environment and give you a bunch of different feels and a bunch of more unique environments. And then they also mention the polar caps, which are obviously a thing in the book. On Arrakis, they have polar caps, so that would obviously be completely different environments than just pure desert. And these polar caps are things that are already planned for post-launch updates to Dune Awakening. And this is one of the first points that they've actually mentioned post-launch content. As this is going to be a full MMO, it's going to be a live service game, just like Conan Exiles was, and just like many other MMOs are. So it's going to constantly be getting new update, and it seems like one of those first ones, one of the ones they already have planned, are the polar caps on Arrakis, which will definitely be a pretty interesting update. That would be a fairly large departure from the general desert gameplay, which would also change up a lot of gameplay mechanics, because as we already know, there is going to be a heat mechanic in Dune Awakening, where if you're just out in the middle of the desert, you'll start overheating and then losing water very quickly, which is a very quick way to die in the game. So going from that to a place that's going to be very harsh but very cold could add in some very interesting new gameplay mechanics and survival elements. But that brings us to the most interesting part about the answer, because in this question, they also asked about going to other planets, because in the Dune universe, there's tons of other planets. Even in the new movies, you get to see a little bit of Caladan, you get to see a little bit of Gedi Prime. So they go on to say, when they start to run out of that, specifically talking about Arrakis and implementing different environments to Arrakis through those polar ice caps and other things, we will start to look at other planets. We have mechanisms in place to enable that. I don't want to talk about that yet since it's so far out, but hopefully people are still playing and liking it, and then we can talk about other planets. So what is basically basically being said here is that they have the systems in place to allow Dune Awakening as a game to go to other planets. Based off of this answer, it sounds like that is something they are implementing and thinking about while they're developing the game. That at some point they're going to want to leave Arrakis. Maybe in a new expansion, you get Caladan as a new planet, or maybe you get Gedi Prime. And that would massively open up the game in terms of just new gameplay. But for people who really like Dune, this would probably be a dream come true, being able to visit a lot of these other planets in the universe. And as Dune Awakening is being pretty heavily inspired by the new Dune movies, I think they may follow the depictions of these different planets in the movies. And if you've seen the movies, the first one basically starts on Caladan, which is the home of House Atreides, and it's this green, lush planet with massive oceans, and compared to Arrakis, it's this oasis, something much more similar to Earth. And if I would have to wager a guess, I would say that's probably the first planet they would take us to, because it's so much different from Arrakis. Arrakis, even though it has some of these different elements with the polar ice caps and some more green areas, it's still generally just a big desert. But you go to Caladan, it's super lush, has all of this greenery, it has these massive oceans, which Arrakis doesn't have, so it would just be a complete departure and something completely different, something completely new, and it could add a lot of new gameplay elements and a lot of new survival elements as well. But then you have some other planets. We also get to see a bit of Gedi Prime in the movies of House Harkonnen, and this planet is described as being almost completely industrial. So they basically turned their kind of normal planet into just complete industry. And with that would obviously come the destruction of most of the environments on the planet. So it would have a completely different feel to Arrakis and to Caladan, because Arrakis and Caladan would still have a lot of nature on them. Arrakis is pretty much just full desert nature that you can't control at all. Caladan would kind of more be similar to Earth, where it's lush, it has all these oceans, but it would still have a lot more civilization on it than Arrakis. But then you have Gedi Prime, which is just completely taken over by industry. Most of the nature on the planet is pretty much completely destroyed, so it would be another very unique planet to go to. And there are many other planets they could take you to, like Kaitane, which is the home of the Emperor of the known universe, so that could be almost like an end game planet you get to, but obviously be like the most heavily guarded area in the universe. I could definitely see some new update or expansion down the road that you get to go and meet the Emperor or something like that, and that could be a pretty hyped up part of the game. So after looking at all of this information and asking the question, is there going to be too much environmental fatigue in Dune Awakening? I think there may be at the start, because even though there's going to be some greener areas, there's going to be the Ecology Labs, I think it's still primarily just going to be desert right off the bat. I think as we get future updates, we go to the polar caps, that's going to be completely different. Then if the game continues to be played and they continue to make content for it, you're probably going to be going to other planets which are going to have completely different environments. So I think in the long run, Dune Awakening is not going to have the problem of all the environments being too samey. I think we're going to get pretty massive departures from Arrakis and even from other planets we may visit. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.